Bulletcast for life.
What is up, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Under the Radar. My name is Brandon. I know it's been a while. I did not have one last week. Took a little bit of a Thanksgiving break just to kind of decompress and kind of get myself together before the finals and everything for school coming up. A little stressed out right now, but I'm happy to be back and do another Under the Radar for all you lovely listeners out there. If you want to listen to my Survivor Series recap, I know Survivor Series has been like 2 weeks already, but it was a fun episode that I did with Dominic. It's over on Curveballs and Chair Shots. Take a listen before it gets taken down, I believe maybe by today or tomorrow. I'm not going to go too much into my Survivor Series weekend. It was fun. Some alcohol may have been consumed. Maybe not to the degree I might have hyped it up as, because I'm trying to be safe and I had to take care of some people, especially on Sunday. But we will get into that when we do the NXT recap, because I got into the spoilers, but now we can get into officially what happened on the matches before NXT TakeOver. But before we do that, we talked a little bit about it on the regular Bulletcast episode on Tuesday, which hopefully next week we will be back to our regularly scheduled program, back in the studio. I know I don't like doing them on the phone. I know the quality isn't as good. I'd much rather would be doing them in person. So hopefully next week we can get back on track with that. But we started off the Bulletcast talking about the NXT UK division, and they're announcing that they are going to be having a takeover special in January. And I'm quite surprised we didn't talk about this, but there have been some big news happening around NXT UK recently, and the biggest one I would say is that officially Walter has signed with WWE. I've talked about Walter in the past on the Bulletcast. Big fan. My eyes were open when he had that match with PCO at the Joey Janela Spring Break event during WrestleMania weekend this year, and he's a great wrestler, PWG champion. He is a big dude. He's from Germany. And the thing about this signing that's interesting is that he's not going to be on mainland WWE. He's going to be mostly based out of the UK still, and he's going to be with NXT UK, which kind of means that WWE is serious about this expansion over in the UK. And I don't know if I'm going to say it's scary or if it's kind of like the 80s all over again, where WWE tries to put all these companies out of business and tries to raid all their talent. But along with Walter being in the WWE, there has been news that has come out that WWE is starting to restructure their contract with their NXT UK, I would say, wrestlers, to where there's much more restrictions. They can't wrestle on certain promotions. They can't be streamed or be on DVDs or anything like that, which significantly hurts these companies, who a lot of their money might come from the live gate, but they also make a boat ton of money, especially on streaming services nowadays. Maybe not DVD as much. PWG still has the hold on the DVD market, but that's PWG and their whole different deal over there. But for NXT UK, I haven't watched a single episode, to be honest. I said on the Bulletcast I'll probably tune into the TakeOver event, maybe watch a couple episodes leading up to it. Since school will be out, I'll have a lot more free time on my hands. But with Walter being signed and the news of these contracts being much more strict and where these people can wrestle, it's very interesting to see what WWE will do in 2019, especially with the AEW promotion possibly coming at the end of 2019, maybe summer of 2019. Still unclear when all that stuff is going to take place, but it can be big news. This might be a sign of things to come. WWE signing up big talent just to take it, maybe not to bolster up the roster as much, but more to kind of take away from other promotions. And I'm not going to sit here and say they're trying to put these companies out of business, but it's just something that we've seen from WWE in the past, and I'm excited to see what Walter can do on NXT UK and what he does, and maybe eventually down the line, if he gets a little older and kind of realizes that, oh, if I go to main roster WWE and I travel the world, I can make a lot of money. But if he's making good money, more than he's ever made on the indie scene in NXT UK, does he really want to go over to WWE and leave his family and start a whole new life over there? We've seen other people do it. I mean, Nakamura, a bunch of other international people have done that, but Walter seems like a different character. He's a great talent. He's very versatile. He can be a big, strong heel. He can be a big, bad babyface, kind of like what Braun Strowman is. He has the German accent, so that kind of adds a different dynamic than some of the other monsters that we see in WWE these days. But if he's just going to be on NXT UK, I don't know the dynamic over there. I assume it's just like NXT. It's just like 205 Live, a much more sports-oriented product, which I enjoy. There's just so much wrestling out there that it's just kind of hard to keep up on everything these days. But with Walter signing to WWE, very big news. It's going to be interesting to see when he comes. Is he going to make an appearance at TakeOver as someone in the crowd? Is he going to have a match at TakeOver or just show up in front of this live audience? It will be interesting to see. Another talent that has possibly signed with WWE is Trevor Lee. Yes, we all know I am the number one fan on the Bulletcast of Trevor Lee, and he was on Impact Wrestling. His contract is seemingly ran out or already ran out. I don't exactly know the specifics on that situation, but it seems as though Trevor Lee is heading to NXT, and that is great news. I felt like he was so underutilized in Impact Wrestling. It's kind of one of those things that we see on WWE main roster where it's a guy who's really good at comedy and can do a whole bunch of different things and entertain the crowd. And they focus on the comedy aspect and they don't take him as a serious act when he could be so much better as a serious act. And hopefully on NXT that Triple H can utilize his grit, and kind of just like Walter, he's a much smaller guy than Walter, but he can be a vicious, crazy heel, or he can be a babyface. Haven't really exactly seen too much of his babyface work down in North Carolina where he's from, so I know he can be a great babyface. I know he can be a great heel, and that just makes him a great wrestler. I mean, Kevin Owens, Adam Cole, even maybe Finn Balor, Seth Rollins. There's just a bunch of different wrestlers out there who can be a great heel, a great babyface. Doesn't exactly matter, and that just shows how great and how versatile that some of these wrestlers are. And with Trevor Lee coming to NXT, that kind of, there's some rumors that maybe Aleister Black will be sent to the main roster down the line, and that makes sense. Aleister Black, one of the bigger names in NXT, he's been there for a while now. If he gets called up, now the number one babyface at this point, there's maybe at the very moment, it would be Velveteen Dream if you just take Aleister Black out of the equation. But then you have Keith Lee and Matt Riddle on the come up. If Trevor Lee comes up, could he unseat those guys? Would he come in as a heel or a babyface? I'm not exactly sure. I mean, if you usually with these big name signings, they're going to come in automatically as a babyface, and then you're going to have to either hot shot them and do something like they did with Kevin Owens, where he just automatically turns and kind of just go for it. You come in as a babyface, but then as soon as he gets there, he turns on someone who's beloved, and that's what makes it easy with NXT for these guys to be cheered and booed. Well, for the most part. I mean, Tommaso Ciampa, he gets booed for the most part. There are some people out there that'll cheer him because they try to be cool, but when you have baby faces that you love so much, and even if you have heels that you know are entertaining and they're good at their job, people will boo the bad guys even though if they like their act, I would say. So Trevor Lee, Walter, big names coming into WWE. We have the Elite. There doesn't seem like they're coming to WWE. I haven't heard anything to suggest they even. I assume they've been offered something, but with all these trademarks and everything else coming out, doesn't look like. Is Trevor Lee and Walter probably the biggest signings WWE could honestly get? Probably. Walter, There were rumors early on in the year that he was offered and he just straight up turned him down because of the travel schedule and he didn't want to go move from Germany. But now that NXT UK is official, it's kind of an everyday thing now. Now that Walter can, stay with his family and he wants to do that, good for him. So, on to some other news. We're going to go to the sports route for a second. And we're going to talk about the XFL. I know it's been a while since we've had some XFL news, but next week, on Wednesday, the XFL is scheduled to announce the 8 teams and cities that will be involved in the recreation of Vince McMahon's football league. And the big rumor or the big news coming out of this a couple days ago is one of the St. Louis sports radio stations basically confirmed that the city is going to be getting a football team, which makes sense. Rams left to go to LA. And now, if that means that that's official, then that means there's 7 open slots that we don't exactly know. We have the Raiders, who are going to be moving to Las Vegas in 2020, which is the first year that the XFL will be running in. So we don't exactly know what's going to go on with that. What is the XFL going to do? Is the XFL going to try to run in places that don't have NFL teams? Or they're going to try to run in places that do have NFL teams and kind of piggyback off of their success and their buildings and go after fans who want football all year round. The Oakland A's are I don't know what you would call it, redesigning or redeveloping the Coliseum site and their new stadium plans. So if they're going to do that the plan is I think 2023. So if the the XFL is going to have a football team, it doesn't seem like they would do it at they wouldn't do it at the Coliseum in Oakland. The original San Francisco Demons took place at AT&T Park or Pac Bell Park at the time, so are they going to go back there and kind of have a real Bay Area football team come back? Because the 49ers technically aren't really in the Bay Area. They're down in Santa Clara, which is more even closer to San Jose than, or more close, well, San Jose, but more close to Silicon Valley than the actual Bay Area. Who knows? You have San Antonio, who was just host to the Royal Rumble last year, and they were rumored to possibly getting the Raiders to move to San Antonio to play at the Alamo Dome for a while before they rebuilt a stadium. You have, all the other big name cities that have NFL teams already. You also have college towns. Could they just use college stadiums and just kind of go after, southern places, Alabama, Mississippi, Florida, these small, or not small, but these really big stadiums that hold college games that aren't going to be used during the springtime. But then, where they're going to practice, where they're going to be the facilities that they, practice, they hold the meetings and do all the kind of behind the scenes stuff besides just the actual stadiums. That's what's the kind of up in the air. What's the whole plan with the XFL? I think this year or this time around, it is kind of better. I don't know if I would say it's better equipped to succeed because they're actually planning this years out in advance. They're not just kind of jumping into it in whatever 12-month or 16-month, idea to start of the season. Who knows exactly how the XFL is going to fare? Me personally, it failed once. The NFL is kind of getting a little bit of an uptick because of the offense and everything else. The domestic violence is kind of back in the news now with Reuben Foster and Kareem Hunt that just happened today, but the whole Colin Kaepernick issue still is looming large, but it's not as big of a deal with mainstream media. And what is the XFL identity? Last time it was hard-hitting football in your nose or in your face and, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. You can't do that nowadays with everything we know about concussions and all the other stuff. People really like offense. They don't want to see defense-heavy games like they saw last time when it's 10-13 because all the rules just favor the defense so they can just tackle the receivers before they can get the ball and there's no foul. That's what's going to be interesting. 2020, we're, a full year away until we're going to, exactly know every little thing about the XFL because by this time, late November, early December of 2019. They should be starting up training camp, or at least like we should know where these games are going to be played, where you can see them, all the other little ins and outs that we don't think of. And Charlie Ebersol, Dick Ebersol's son, is going to be starting a football league of his own in 2019. Might be an early barometer to see how the XFL will play out. It gets a whole year head start, so does that mean they're going to take the best players that are available? Does the XFL and this, I forget exactly what it's called, like the American Football Alliance or something like that, do they just kind of prey on the college people who don't get drafted or NFL people who get cut? Not exactly sure what's going to go on there, but with the XFL announcing the teams next week, it should be fun to see where everything stacks up. My guess, they're going to have one in St. Louis, probably one in San Antonio, definitely one in the New York, Connecticut, somewhere in that region, the Northeast. They're going to probably have some Southern teams, maybe some Middle America teams. California, and do you go with the Bay Area? Do you go with Fresno? Maybe they go to San Diego. I think San Diego is probably a really good possibility for that. But do you go to Fresno? Not exactly sure. It's going to be interesting to see what that press conference looks like, and especially if Vince McMahon is going to be there. It's another rare time to see Vince McMahon out in the public view, and that's always something fun to see. So let's move on to some previewing of Raw. We have a match that was announced, I believe today. We have Ronda Rousey making another wrestling appearance on Raw. She will team up with her girl Natalya to go up against the formidable duo of Nia Jax and Tamina. So, that's probably what you expect. What's going to happen is going to be probably a shorter tag team match. Ronda Rousey and Natalya probably going to win. Tamina's there to take the fall. Maybe I don't know exactly what they're being called. Tamina and Nia Jax are going to it's either going to be Tamina takes the pin for Ronda, taps out to her, or the other team is going to get disqualified. It seems pretty straightforward. Raw ratings have been slipping recently. They've been just kind of on a downward spiral. I think it shows that they did have some pretty stiff competition for football a couple weeks ago after Survivor Series. But Raw in general just has not been a good show recently. You have Baron Corbin almost being like Stone Cold Steve Austin, being in 4 or 5 segments for the entire episode, and with Raw being 3 hours, it just shows when it comes to WrestleMania time, it's fun to have 3-hour Raws because they're just jam-packed. There's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of hot angles. But then when you come to the dog days of summer, you come to the dog days of winter like we are right now, and they're just kind of limping along, just kind of waiting for Royal Rumble to get like the really big plans and start doing things. Or we also can't blame. I mean, you can blame most of it on the booking, but you had the Roman Reigns leukemia announcement, which definitely threw everything for a loop. Roman would probably be the top person on Raw right now. Dean and Seth would not be feuding at the moment. Who knows what other things would be happening? Elias wouldn't have turned babyface. Maybe Lashley wouldn't have turned heel. Who knows exactly? Braun Strowman would probably be out with his elbow injury just because it seems like he's been dealing with that for a while, and he probably put it off because of what happened with the Roman Reigns injury or leukemia announcement. So he kind of sucked it up for a little bit, and then now that he kind of got to get in the swing of Royal Rumble, this was kind of a big enough layoff that I guess he can take off a couple weeks and possibly miss TLC, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. So this Ronda Rousey announcement, having a match on Raw, I think it's kind of losing its luster a little bit since she has wrestled on Raw a few times this year already. So it's kind of they don't have a lot of aces in the hole, I would say, to kind of pop a rating anymore, except for, legends coming back or a Universal Championship match. Like if Brock Lesnar were to ever wrestle on Raw, I think that's kind of the last big main roster current stars that I guess you can use to pop a rating. But the tag match should be fine. Should be kind of fun. Not expecting a whole lot from Raw this week. Braun Strowman apparently is going to be showing up 1 week after his elbow surgery. As I kind of said, it's still up in the air if he is going to wrestle at TLC. He probably will, but we will have to wait and see on that. So, enough talk of the main roster. Let's go to NXT and start off with the 2 weeks ago, or last week's, I would say, NXT show from November 21st, 2018. This one took place at the Staples Center. These were the matches that happened before the NXT War Games Takeover special, and I was in attendance, and I kind of alluded to it on the NXT Takeover instant analysis that you guys might have heard. I was pretty inebriated at this point when we got to the arena, so I remember all the matches, but I do not remember all the little details. And I mean, a lot of these matches, there was not a whole lot of details in these. We had pretty much two straight up squash matches, and then we had a pretty good women's match as the main event. So let's jump into it. Vic Joseph, Nigel McGuinness, and Percy Watson are the announcers, and we have Keith Lee facing off against Fidel Bravo. Keith Lee wins rather quickly, just straight up squash match. Keith Lee wins in 2 minutes. Pretty straightforward. It was fun to see Keith Lee live. He does some Keith Lee things. Very agile for a big man, and just exactly what you would have thought. Coming out there is a squash. He wins, get in, get out, bada boom. And with this being the show after TakeOver, a lot of recaps, just kind of going over all the different matches that took place. So there's going to be a lot of video packages on this show, so I'm not going to really go over all those. Pretty straightforward, just, showing footage of the TakeOver, a little bit of some backstage promos, but nothing too major, so just gonna jump over those. We have Lars Sullivan taking on Keita Murray. Lars Sullivan squashes him in 25 seconds, nothing there. And then Lars Sullivan cuts a promo afterwards, just said that he's going to destroy everybody until he gets his NXT championship, and then he puts the mic down and he starts attacking the guy even more. But then Keith Lee runs out and makes the save, and this sets up a match that we will cover right after this, where Keith Lee and Lars Sullivan will face off in San Jose. So, just simple, straight up, heel being a heel. Babyface actually comes out to help somebody, something that I wish we could have saw on Raw this week with all the beatdowns of the Three Horsemen just running rampant on Raw, destroying Elias, destroying Finn Balor, and nobody comes out and helps them. Just kind of makes the babyfaces look like they have no friends, or the babyfaces don't care about each other. Just simple storytelling like this. I know it has nothing to do with Murray, but it's all about Keith Lee. But just Keith Lee coming out, a babyface making a run in to save another person. That's illogical, and that's what a good person would do. When a heel, especially someone like a Lars Sullivan, is clearly taking advantage of somebody, a babyface would come out to stop that, and that's what Keith Lee did. So we, more backstage. We have a backstage interview with Aleister Black, and he bumps into Candice LeRae, and that kind of sets up the match with Nikki Cross and Candice LeRae. Candice being a subtle heel a little bit in the backstage segment with Aleister Black, but Candice comes out all cheery, comes out with, I believe, her niece or some young person that's related. I believe it's her niece. Some girl drew up a cupcake drawing or something, and Candice had that as her ring gear. Very nice, very touching. And we have Nikki Cross versus Candice LeRae, and Nikki Cross gets the victory in 7 minutes and 5 seconds. Both of these it was a good match. Both of these women desperately need a win, with Candice LeRae kind of falling off. Nikki Cross is kind of said in the past, kind of a comedy figure. She's been elevated in terms of being on these main event type angles with the Aleister Black, Johnny Gargano situation, but she just hasn't really been getting big wins recently. So with these two, I was thinking Nikki Cross was going to do the job on the way out, but she did not. She gets a victory over Candice, which I don't know if that means anything bad for Candice, but I think that's hinting towards some sort of heel turn for her, probably joining Johnny Gargano. It's going to be interesting to see what Candice LeRae can do as a heel. we thought, oh, Daniel or Johnny Gargano, why are they going to turn him heel? They shouldn't do that. Honestly, they shouldn't have, because they should have never been in that predicament to turn him heel, because people were booing him in the first place. But with Candice turning heel, it should add a fun dynamic to Johnny Gargano's act if they do team him up, which I think at this point seems like that's what they're going to do, since they're so closely linked on the NXT TakeOver, or on the NXT show. And Nikki Cross gets the victory. She was on SmackDown that 1 week against Becky Lynch. Has not been seen since. Sanity was on the Survivor Series tag team match on the pre-show. They haven't really been seen since. You would think, now that they got the whole gang back together, that they would get at least some sort of push, but doesn't seem like that. So, the show itself, typical post-takeover show, just a lot of video packages, some decent backstage promo work, but the match itself, pretty straightforward. 2 squash matches, 1 back and forth women's match. Being there live, it was exactly what you would have thought. I mean, they got in and out. They did all this stuff in like 20 minutes at most. So it was pretty fun just to get in and out and just kind of get high-paced action back and forth with the Keith Lee, the Lars Sullivan, and then the Nikki Cross Candice LeRae stuff at the end was fun. So I was very inebriated at this point. I do not remember a whole lot about the Nikki Cross Candice LeRae match itself, but with the Lars Sullivan and Keith Lee squashes, just being squashes, I definitely remember those, but I did not remember Keith Lee making the save on Lars Sullivan, to be honest, so it just kind of shows you where my mind was at this time. So let's move on to the next week's episode of the next week's episode of NXT, which was this week's episode. We will be going over 2 episodes. I'm just going above and beyond. So this show took place in San Jose, California, at the San Jose State University Event Center. I've been there a few times for NXT events. I was there WrestleMania weekend. I believe it was like the first show that NXT ran outside of Florida, or I don't exactly know what the exact terminology was that they used, because I think they did like the Arnold Classics before that, but this was kind of like the first really big show that they did outside of Florida, so it was kind of fun to see that. And it was, well, that show was great. This show I was not there. This was the Thursday before the Survivor Series weekend, so this technically happened before everything that happened on TakeOver, but who's really counting? So this, once again, Vic Joseph and just Nigel McGuinness, no Percy Watson on this episode. I do not believe they were shown at all on camera, so they were just, they were announcing it from the Performance Center, I assume. So let's jump right into it. We have Oney Lorcan and Danny Burch facing off against the mighty Shane Thorne and Nick Miller. Oney Lorcan and Danny Burch get the victory in 7 minutes and 51 seconds. The mighty got a bulk of the offense, and it was a decent match. Just kind of felt a little bit long at times. I don't know what's wrong with the mighty. They were really over as babyfaces a year ago, before the injury took place, and now they're heels. You would think they would have got somewhat of a push, but not really. They're just kind of there. They had their little feud with the Street Profits, but they just haven't really gotten over as heels. I don't know if it's they changed their style up, if it's just the characters aren't really connecting with the crowd, but it's kind of, I wouldn't say it's sad, but it's just kind of disappointing to see what's happened with the mighty. I wouldn't say they're like DIY or even End Zone Cast in terms of how over they were as babyfaces, but they were kind of going in the right direction, and they're nowhere near where the Revival were, even AOP at this point, so a little disappointing to see what the mighty have done. The mighty have fallen, you might say. So post-match, the mighty ambush Oney and Lorcan after their victory. So the mighty take the loss, but they get their heat right back, and it looks like we're going to see this match again. So they hyped up the Mia Yim and Vanessa Bourne match, and then Lars Sullivan is going to face off against Keith Lee. They do a recap of the EC3 assault that happened a few weeks ago from Bobby Fish and Adam Cole, or the Undisputed Era in total. And EC3 comes out to face Marcel Barthel and EC3 gets a victory in 4 minutes. Once again, straightforward, pretty much a squash. And then afterwards, after the match, EC3 comes out and cuts a promo, basically calling out Bobby Fish, saying he's going to get revenge on what he did to his knee. And straightforward, good, simple promo from EC3. Just took out the silliness that he's had recently. Just kind of was serious, straightforward. That was a good promo by EC3. And an EC3 Bobby Fish feud should be a whole lot of fun. Bobby Fish been on the shelf for a year. EC3's took the loss against Velveteen Dream. So both of these men need a win in this feud. So it's kind of another one of those feuds where you can see it going back and forth. I think if they're serious with EC3, they're going to give him the victory here. If he's on his way out to go up to the main roster, if Vince is that high on him or just wants him to get called up, I can see Bobby Fish winning, especially if Undisputed Era is going to stay where they are. They're huge. They're over as baby faces, even though they're like the top heels in the company. I'm excited to see where this feud goes. So then they do a Dijokovic vignette, which is Donovan Dijak, and now he's a Russian, I guess. I don't know. Just a vignette, just kind of simple, scary monster stuff, kind of similar to what they're doing with Lars Sullivan on WWE. We're just gonna have to wait and see what happens. So we have Mia Yim going up against Vanessa Bourne, two Mae Young Classic veterans, and Mia Yim gets the victory in 4 minutes and 19 seconds. It was a good match. I mean, just a simple, sub 5 minute women's match, so not a whole lot here. I'm high on Mia Yim. I think she can be a really good babyface, especially if Candice LeRae is turning heel. Nikki Cross kind of been there, done that. Kairi Sane also kind of been there, done that, especially if they're going to have Shayna Baszler and the Four Horsewomen kind of run rampant on the women's division. Io Shirai's there. Is Mia Yim on the... is she on the come-up? Possibly. I think she's a solid veteran hand to be in NXT. Would she get to WWE eventually? Maybe, but if she never does, if she's kind of like the female version of... Well, I know Eric Young technically made it to WWE, but let's be honest, he's not really doing a whole bunch there. If she turns out to be like the female version of Eric Young, just kind of a veteran hand, goes there, kind of helps all the girls, go through their stuff, kind of teaches them how to do things, I think that's a good spot for her. So, next up, we have the Tommaso Ciampa does a backstage promo on his cell phone and just kind of reminds him that he's going to fulfill his promise and he's the greatest sports entertainer of all time and he will return to NXT on next week's episode. And they also did a War Raider kind of update video, just them in the trainer's room, just selling the, not injuries, but just selling the brutality of War Games. Just good, simple little things here. And next up, we have the main event, Keith Lee versus Lars Sullivan. And this was a pretty good match. I mean, I don't know if I'd say really good match. It was a good match. Lars Sullivan actually gets the victory here. So with Lars Sullivan getting the vignettes and probably a big push coming on the main roster, similar to the thinking of Nikki Cross, maybe Lars is going to do the job on the way out, and this is his final thing before he goes up to main roster. Maybe not. Maybe they're keeping him strong because they know what he's going to be doing in WWE. But then also with Keith Lee being undefeated, it kind of just takes that undefeated streak out of him, and it kind of opens up the more possibilities of what he can do on other matches. You don't have to, if he is undefeated, you don't have to be tied down to having Keith Lee winning every single match until you want him to have that first loss. Now he's had this first loss. It was a clean win for the most part from Lars Sullivan, and Keith Lee went for the moonsault. He whiffs, and then Sullivan hits the freak accident for a win. So kind of a sudden victory for Lars Sullivan. Keith Lee definitely had his share of offense in the match. It wasn't the best match in the world. It was good. Do you blame it on Keith Lee? Do you blame it on Sullivan? Both. Who knows? But I don't know why you have Lars Sullivan really go over that strongly. Like, it's not even have him cheat to win or do anything here. Like, is that orders from Vince that Lars Sullivan has to be undefeated until he makes it to the main roster, so they could just lie and say he's an unstoppable monster, even though we've seen him lose to Aleister Black. Who exactly knows? I thought Keith Lee was on the rise a little bit. I'm not going to sit here and say he was catching fire by any means, but I thought he was a good babyface, and it kind of takes the wind out of his sails right now, just kind of losing straight up to Lars Sullivan. Who knows? We're going to have to wait and see. We'll be back in Full Sail next week, and there's been some TV tapings. I've seen I've seen some spoilers, but it's just kind of the spoilers that I'm pretty sure you guys have seen. If you haven't, good for you. I'm not going to say them here. If you've managed to go at it this long without seeing the spoilers, good for you. I'm not going to spoil it here for you. Another decent show. Just technically it was before Takeover, so another kind of pre-match or pre-taped show after Takeover, to where not a whole lot happens. Just some simple matches, just not a whole lot of storyline development, but we did have the beginning of the EC3 Bobby Fish feud, with EC3 cutting that promo. So it wasn't like nothing happened on the show. Not a whole lot happened on the show. Not a lot of main event stuff going on, but should be different next week, especially with Tommaso Ciampa doing something. Either he's wrestling or cutting a promo in front of the crowd next week on NXT. So we will have to stay tuned and see where the NXT Championship will go from there. And next up, and finally, we have Total Divas Review. This is the season finale of Total Divas, episode 10, season who even knows. So there were two big storylines going on this episode. The first one, unfortunately, this is the episode where they address where Jim Neidhart passes away. Not going to be super cynical on this show. Not going to be super critical, but they basically kind of talked about Jim having they straight up said he had Alzheimer's, and they said he has the gene for Alzheimer's. That's the reason why he had it. They didn't get into the reality of the situation, to where he probably suffered a lot of concussions while in his wrestling career, and that accelerated or outright gave him the Alzheimer's. I mean, what can you expect from WWE? They're not going to come out and say on one of their fluff piece reality shows that wrestling is the reason why Natalia's dad died. No, I did not expect them to tackle that situation, but I could have hoped that they would have been real on a reality show, but that's just too much to ask. So they go, I don't know, like sometime during the summer, Natalya goes over to her dad's, and Natty's mom kind of talks about how he's been forgetting things and ordering a lot of shoes and like repeat ordering stuff. So Natalya goes, and she was kind of crying and just kind of realizing the severity of the situation, and she got tested for the Alzheimer's gene, and luckily for her, she did not test positive for it, so she does not have the Alzheimer's gene. And she goes to the gym with her dad, just simple stuff, just kind of bonding and just kind of showing the love and the connection they have with her, or with her and her dad. And we also saw an appearance from Natalya's other sister. We've seen her other sister in past episodes where she's kind of flirting with Biggie, and that's kind of a side under storyline that the Natalya's sister has the hots for Biggie, which is kind of a fun little storyline there. We see her other sister, oh god, I forget what her name is, but she sounded like a heart, she looked like a heart, and it was just another fun dynamic between the two sisters. They go on their merry ways. The other storyline is Money in the Bank, and the women preparing for that. So all of them, for the most part, being in the Money in the Bank ladder match. And Daniel Bryan, this was also the show where Daniel Bryan takes on Big Cass. He tapped him out, and they showed Brie and Nikki and Birdie watching Money in the Bank from their house in Arizona or San Diego. I don't know, one of their houses, and Birdie was watching TV. It was the cutest little thing. Birdie saw that her dad was on TV, and she like couldn't look away, and she was just mesmerized by what Daniel was doing, and yeah. And then they show the women kind of stressing out about the Money in the Bank match. Naomi and Jimmy Uso, I think it's Jimmy. I don't know. And Naomi's or one of their cars got broken into, and Naomi had her bag in there, which had her wedding ring, and that got stolen. So then they had a whole kind of mini fight about her wearing her ring, and then at the end they end up getting tattoos of each other. Well, not of each other, but like they get ring tattoos on their left ring finger of their initial. So good for them. And then they go to Money in the Bank. They kind of talk that up a little bit. Alexa Bliss getting some shine on Total Divas, a former Total Diva herself. Don't exactly know why she's not on the show. Maybe it is true that her and Nia Jax have heat, but then like a couple weeks ago they posted something about each other, so I guess they kissed and make up, so good for them. And then finally we go back to Natalya, and they kind of just go to a kind of jarring just graphic on the screen that shows 2 months later that Jim Neidhart died, and then they go to Natalya kind of walks through what happened. She gets a phone call from her sister like 7 o'clock in the morning that he died. And then we just jump forward to the funeral. We see Natalya and her family setting up, just kind of putting little pieces of Jim, some pictures, some memorabilia, some like little family things. And then they go and they show Natalya's eulogy or speech. I don't exactly know what you call it, but her talking at the funeral, kind of tearing up, and they didn't exactly show, a bunch of famous people there. Of course, they're not going to just exploit everybody. You saw Stephanie in there at one point. I think you saw Bulldog's kid. There's some other, it was definitely a lot of people that were at that funeral, and they did not, I appreciate that WWE didn't just sit there and kind of exploit just everybody who was there, and I don't think that they were there to do that anyways. They were just kind of there to focus on Jim and focus on Natalya and just let everybody do their own thing. So that was it for the Total Divas review, and then they ran an advert for Total Bellas. Will be coming back in mid-January. It's going to be interesting to see what they do there, especially with Daniel Bryan being on probably a lot of these episodes, and I would love to see Daniel Bryan just be an all-out heel the entire time. I know he would probably love to do that, but I don't think the producers or Brie or WWE would want him to do that. So, anyways, that will do it for me for today. Thank you guys very much for listening. 43 minutes. Jeez. It's back to my old self. Just keep babbling on and on about nonsense. So, thank you very much. Still have not received a single email to the Under the Radar mailbag. If you would like to send an email question or anything, just a statement. Maybe not a statement. We don't want to have any stupid things said on the podcast. But if you have a question, no matter how stupid, no matter how random, there's no such thing as a stupid question. Only stupid people asking questions. So, with that being said, the mailbag is utrmailbag@gmail.com. That is utrmailbag@gmail.com. Thank you all very much for listening today. Have a very safe and happy weekend. I will be back next Tuesday, back to our regularly scheduled program. Don't exactly know what I'll be talking about. Hopefully there will be some big news that breaks over the weekend or something. I don't know. We'll see. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. Goodbye and good night. Bang.